My name is Rachel Hart, and this is the story of how I was erased from my own family while my brother was handed the world. I used to think love in a family was supposed to be unconditional, that if I worked hard, stayed kind, and never caused trouble, they'd see me. But I was wrong. So painfully wrong. I grew up in a modest white ranch house on a quiet street in Denton, Texas. My parents, Tom and Evelyn Hart, were the kind of people who believed in hard work, Sunday dinners, and pretending everything was fine even when it wasn't. I was the eldest by 5 years. My brother Kyle came along late and immediately became the golden boy. I was the overachiever. Good grades, honor roll, student council. I was never a problem. But with Kyle, everything was different. When I got into college, I was told, "That's great, Rachel. Just don't forget where you came from." When Kyle managed to scrape through high school without getting expelled, it was a full-blown celebration. At first, I didn't care. I loved him. He was my baby brother. I was proud to help him. I thought if I stayed patient, maybe one day they'd treat me like I mattered too. By the time I was 27, I had a stable job as a vet tech and lived in a tiny but well-kept apartment 2 towns over. I paid my bills, made my own meals, and sent money home every month, $400 like clockwork. My mom always said it helped with the little things: groceries, car repairs, the water bill. I didn't question it. Family takes care of each other, right? Kyle was 22, unemployed, and still living at home. He spent most of his days sleeping in, playing video games, and going out at night with friends who had even less ambition than he did. He'd flunked out of community college. Twice. My parents made excuses like it was a sport. "He just needs time," Dad said. "College isn't for everyone," Mom added. "But what about responsibility?" I once asked. "He doesn't even try." That was the first time my mom looked at me like I was the villain. "You've always had it easy, Rachel," she snapped. "Don't forget how lucky you are." Lucky? I was lucky to have taken out student loans no one helped me pay. Lucky to work double shifts at the clinic while Kyle got to sleep in and play Xbox all day. I started to notice the cracks in their facade a few years ago when I came home for Thanksgiving. The house looked different, nicer. Fresh paint, a new security system, even a shiny silver pickup truck in the driveway. "Is that Kyle's?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh, we helped him finance it," Dad said. "He needs reliable transportation if he's ever going to land a job." "He doesn't have a job," I replied. My mom's eyes went cold. "It's none of your business how we support our son." Our son. As if I were just some outsider looking in. But the final blow came one breezy Sunday afternoon in March. I had taken a drive to surprise them, to bring over some homemade lemon bread and visit. When I pulled into the driveway, the for sale sign that had been up for months was gone. I assumed they'd decided to stay, but what they told me next hit like a punch to the chest. "We took the house off the market," Mom said brightly, pouring tea like we were discussing the weather. "We're giving it to Kyle." I blinked. "You're what?" "He's going to settle here, maybe start fresh. It's time we helped him get his footing." I looked from one to the other, my heart pounding. "You're giving him the house," I repeated, stunned. "What about me? I've been helping you for years. I've paid for repairs, groceries." "You've always been the responsible one," Mom said dismissively. "You don't need help." That sentence, that one dismissive little sentence, was like the sound of a door locking behind me. "But he hasn't earned it," I said, voice shaking. "You're rewarding him for doing nothing." My father frowned. "You're sounding jealous, Rachel." And then my mother added the nail in the coffin. "Frankly, you've always taken care of yourself. We didn't think you needed us." I stood there, my lemon bread still wrapped in foil on the table, realizing for the first time that I had been erased from my own family. I had become the background character in a story where Kyle was the hero. I left without finishing my tea. I drove back home in silence, the roads blurry from the tears I refused to let fall. That night, I opened my banking app and canceled the automatic transfer I had been sending every month for the past 7 years. No message, no explanation, just silence. Because if I had to take care of myself, I was going to do it for real this time. And I was just getting started. The silence didn't last long. 3 days after I stopped the monthly transfer, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from my mother. Her voice was sickly sweet, the kind of tone she used when she wanted something. "Hi, honey. Just checking in. I think there might have been a glitch with your bank. The money didn't come through this month. Can you double check, sweetheart? Not a single word about me. About how I was doing. Just the money. I didn't call back. 2 days later, Jason texted me. Where's the rent? No punctuation, no greeting, just entitlement in its purest form. He hadn't worked in years, but somehow I was still expected to fund his life. By the end of the week, I had 3 more messages from Mom. The last one was blunt. This is unfair, Rachel. Jason is counting on you. We all are. You can't just abandon your family. But I could. And I did. For once, I didn't respond. Sunday morning, I got a call from my Aunt Brenda, my mom's older sister, the only family member who hadn't lost her mind. Her voice was cautious, concerned. Rachel, your mom called me crying, says you've cut her off, says you're punishing her. I took a deep breath. She gave the house to Jason, Aunt Brenda. After everything, and then she called me a freeloader. Brenda was silent for a moment. Then she let out a breath. I'm not surprised. She's always made excuses for that boy. I told her this would catch up with her one day. I'm just done, I said. Done trying to earn love. That's never coming. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. I thought cutting them off would make me feel guilty. That I'd lie awake wondering if they were okay, if I'd done the right thing. But instead, I felt lighter. Like someone had lifted a 1,000-pound anchor from my chest. But of course, Jason and my mother weren't going to go quietly. 3 weeks later, I came home from work to find a letter shoved under my apartment door. No return address. Just my name scribbled on the front in my mother's handwriting. Inside, it was a mess of blue ink and bitter accusations. Rachel, I cannot believe how selfish you've become. You think Jason doesn't deserve help? He's had a harder life than you ever did. You had scholarships, a job, your own place. Jason is trying his best. And now you've cut us off, left us to struggle. That money you sent wasn't charity, it was your responsibility as a daughter. If you can't support your family when it matters, maybe you're not the daughter we thought you were. Mom, I sat on my couch, reading it again and again. My hands didn't shake, my eyes didn't sting. Because for the first time ever, I didn't feel hurt. I felt angry. They weren't just entitled, they were delusional. My success wasn't luck. It was built on exhaustion, on missed vacations, on skipped meals and second jobs. But they couldn't see that. Because in their eyes, I was just the responsible one. The one who never needed anything. A week later, I got another surprise. A call from Mrs. Ramirez, the neighbor who lived across the street from my childhood home. Rachel, I hate to be a gossip, she said, lowering her voice like she was telling a state secret. But I saw Jason outside last night, screaming into his phone, throwing things. I think he's having some kind of meltdown. I thanked her, hung up, and waited. Sure enough, 3 days later, another voicemail arrived. This time from Mom. Her voice was frantic, desperate. Rachel, please. Jason's talking about selling the house. He says he can't keep up with bills. He's talking about moving in with some girl who doesn't even have a job. I'm scared. We need your help. I deleted the voicemail without replying. They wanted me to fix everything. Again. But I was done being the solution to a problem they created. The next day, I blocked both their numbers. But the thing about people like Jason and my mother? When guilt doesn't work, they try something else. Manipulation. It came in the form of a knock on my door one rainy Thursday afternoon. I peered through the peephole and felt my stomach twist. Jason. His hair was slick with rain, his hoodie soaked through. He looked like a wet dog that had wandered too far from home. Sis, he said. Open the door. We need to talk. No, I said through the door. He shifted his weight, trying to look pathetic. Come on, just 5 minutes. I didn't respond. Eventually, he muttered something I couldn't hear and stomped off into the rain. But that wasn't the end. 2 days later, he showed up again, this time in the lobby of my office building. I was coming down from the elevator when I saw him slouched in a chair, dark circles under his eyes. Don't make a scene, he said quickly, rising to his feet. I walked right past him. He grabbed my arm. You're really gonna pretend like we don't exist? He snapped. I yanked my arm free. I've been pretending for years. Pretending I had a family who cared about me. Mom's sick over this, he hissed. You've ruined her. No, Jason, I said calmly. She ruined herself by giving you everything and calling me a freeloader. You think you're better than us? I think I worked for everything I have. You wouldn't know what that feels like. He backed away, shocked. "You'll regret this." "No," I said, "I'll finally be free." And I meant it. They had taken everything they could from me, my time, my money, my emotional energy, but they would never get one more thing. From now on, I would choose myself. And for the first time, that choice didn't feel selfish. It felt right. Title: They Gave Him Everything and Left Me with Nothing, Part 3. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. After Jason stormed out of my office lobby, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd finally leave me alone. But I should have known better. Because when guilt fails and manipulation doesn't land, the next weapon is always the smear campaign. It started with a phone call from my high school friend, Megan. "Hey Rach," she said, hesitant. "I thought you should know. Your mom's been going around telling people you abandoned the family." I blinked. "That's not surprising. She told the church ladies you're selfish, that you think you're too good for your roots, and she even said you threatened Jason." "What?" I asked, stunned. "Threatened him how?" "She didn't say. Just implied you called the cops on him and tried to kick him when he was down." I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Wow, she really pulled out the drama script. "It's not working on everyone," Megan added. "Some people are starting to ask questions." I thanked her and hung up, but my mind was racing. Not because the lies hurt, they didn't. What rattled me was how easy it was for her to twist the story. She didn't need facts. She just needed an audience that was willing to believe the worst about me. For years, I thought if I just worked harder, gave more, stayed quiet, people would see the truth. That I wasn't the problem. But people like my mom, they don't want truth, they want control. And when they lose control, they rewrite history. So I did what I should have done long ago. I started documenting everything. I dug through old emails, texts, voicemails, anything that showed what had really happened over the years. The late-night calls for money, the guilt trips, the cruel comments masked as advice. I printed screenshots, backed up messages, even kept Jason's latest voicemail, where he told me I'd regret turning my back on my only family. Then came the final straw. One Thursday morning, while drinking my coffee, I opened my inbox and saw an unexpected message. Subject: Property Listing Inquiry. Confused, I clicked on it. It was a follow-up email from a realtor. "Hi Rachel, following up on your inquiry. The listing for the Maple Avenue home is attached. Let me know if you'd like to schedule a tour." Wait, what? I hadn't asked about any house. I opened the link, and there it was, my childhood home. Listed for sale, staged, polished, unrecognizable. Gone were the old curtains Mom used to hem by hand. Gone was the porch swing Dad built. Even the garden was stripped and replaced with sterile landscaping and decorative rocks. It looked like a stranger's house. I called Aunt Brenda immediately. "They're selling it?" I asked. There was a long pause. "Jason maxed out 3 credit cards," she said finally. "He's broke. Your mom can't bail him out anymore. And the house, well, it's the only asset left." I closed my eyes. "They gave him the house like it was a trophy," I whispered. "And now he's cashing it in like a slot machine." "You don't deserve this," she said. "You never did." That night, I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. I just stared at the listing, realizing the house had been gone a long time. The moment my parents gave it to Jason without even telling me, it stopped being mine. It wasn't about bricks and drywall. It was about what it represented. Sacrifice, trust, the belief that someday I'd be seen. But I wasn't, and I wouldn't be. So I closed the laptop, stood up, and walked to the kitchen. There, taped on the fridge, was a sticky note I'd written weeks ago. "Put yourself first, for once, and don't apologize." And that's what I did. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to survive anymore. I was going to build. I logged into my online banking and looked at the savings account I'd quietly created the day I stopped sending them money. Over the months, it had grown, little by little. I hadn't even known what I was saving for. I just knew I needed something that belonged to me. Now I knew exactly what it was for. I pulled up real estate listings in a nearby town. Nothing fancy. Just safe, quiet, and mine. One caught my eye. A small 2-bedroom cottage with a sun porch and a backyard just big enough for a garden. I scheduled a tour, and when I walked through the front door, something inside me whispered, "This is it." It wasn't flashy. The kitchen needed updating. The wallpaper was questionable, but the air felt light. It felt like freedom. I put in an offer that afternoon. It was accepted the next morning. And just like that, I was no longer the daughter begging to be noticed. I was the woman building her own life, a life they couldn't touch. The first morning in my new home felt unreal. I brewed a pot of coffee, stood barefoot on the back porch, and let the steam drift into the crisp morning air. For the first time in years, there was no buzzing phone, no guilt trip messages, no tension clinging to my chest like static. Just quiet, just peace. It was mine. But peace doesn't last long when your family sees boundaries as betrayal. A week after I moved in, the knock came. I wasn't expecting anyone. I peeked through the blinds. Jason. Same unshaven face, same storm cloud energy. But this time he looked smaller, defeated, like the world was finally catching up to him. I didn't open the door. He knocked again, louder. "Rachel," he called. "Come on. I'm not here to fight." I opened the door just a crack, leaving the screen locked between us. "What do you want?" He hesitated, shoving his hands into the pockets of a hoodie I recognized from high school. "It's Mom," he said. "She fell, hurt her hip. She's got surgery scheduled and, well, the insurance is not covering all of it." I blinked. "Okay, and?" He looked at me like I'd just asked why the sky was blue. "We need help. You've always been the responsible one." There it was again, that phrase. The badge they handed me without asking, the excuse they used every time they wanted to dump their problems in my lap. I took a slow breath. "Jason, you live 10 minutes from her. You're her son. Why isn't this on you?" His expression shifted from pleading to angry. "Don't do this. You know she's always been better with you." "I've been trying. You pawned Dad's tools. You maxed out credit cards. You sold the house. Trying isn't enough anymore." His jaw clenched. "So that's it? You're just gonna let her suffer?" I crossed my arms. "No, Jason. I'm going to let her deal with the consequences of the choices she made. I spent years pouring myself into a family that only saw me when they needed something. I'm done. You've changed." "I know," I said, "and it's the best decision I've ever made." He didn't yell, didn't beg. He just stared, like he was looking at someone he didn't recognize. And maybe he wasn't. Because I wasn't the girl who cried herself to sleep wondering why she wasn't enough. I wasn't the daughter who sent money to keep the peace. I wasn't the sister who bailed him out every time life got too hard. I was someone else now. I closed the door and locked it. That night, I didn't replay the conversation in my head. I didn't wonder if I was heartless. I didn't even feel sad. I felt free. The next few weeks passed in quiet waves. I started setting up my new space. Hung sheer curtains in the kitchen, planted lavender by the porch, and even adopted a cat from the local shelter. Her name was Junebug, and she liked to sit on the windowsill like she'd owned the place before I ever got there. I kept expecting chaos to knock again. But it didn't. Until it did. One morning, I got a message from an old friend, Alyssa, someone I hadn't spoken to since high school. "Hey, just wanted to let you know, your mom's been talking. She told the church that you cut off contact and left her penniless. That Jason's struggling because of your abandonment. I'm sorry, but it's spreading fast." Of course, I should have known she wouldn't give up quietly. But what shook me wasn't the fact that she was lying. It was that people were listening. People who knew me. People who once clapped when I got my first job, hugged me at Dad's funeral, posted heart emojis on my graduation photos. Now they were whispering behind closed doors, painting me as the villain in a tragedy my family created. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. Let them say what they want. I'm done fighting a battle where truth doesn't matter. I meant it, but it still stung, because somewhere deep down, a part of me still wanted to be understood. Still wanted someone, anyone, to say she didn't deserve this. But no one was coming to say it, so I had to be that voice for myself. That weekend, I sat at my desk and opened the folder I'd labeled receipts. Inside were years of evidence, screenshots, emails, voicemails. Proof. Proof that I wasn't heartless. Proof that I had given and given until there was nothing left. I wasn't planning to use it. Not yet. But just knowing it was there felt like armor. If they ever tried to drag me into court, into another round of shame and guilt and gaslighting, I'd be ready. Because now I wasn't just surviving. I was prepared. That Monday, I started something new. I enrolled in a local art class. Nothing serious, just watercolors in the evenings, surrounded by strangers who didn't know my history. It was strange at first, having conversations that didn't involve apologies or explanations. No one asked about my family. No one looked at me like I owed them something. They just saw me. Rachel, a woman with paint on her fingers and peace in her chest. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something better than forgiveness. It was the beginning of freedom. I thought that would be the end of it. The door was closed. Jason had slinked away. I was finding joy in my own routines, reading in bed, watering my new herbs, teaching Junebug not to knock plants off the windowsill, with very little success. For the first time in years, my life wasn't about damage control. But peace, I've learned, has a short shelf life when people like my mother believe silence is a challenge. It started with a message from Miss Carly, my old middle school English teacher, now a part-time community organizer and full-time gossip sponge. She'd been a mentor once, someone who saw potential in me when my parents were too busy shielding Jason from his own consequences. Her email was short. Rachel, your mom's been talking again. She's spinning quite the tale at the church social meetings. Said you abandoned her during a health crisis. Said Jason's on the verge of homelessness. People are starting to ask questions. Just thought you should know. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the screen. I wanted to feel something, anger, hurt, betrayal, but all I felt was tired. Because this wasn't new, it was the same game, just a new chapter. They weren't getting the money. They weren't getting the sympathy. So now they were after the one thing they had left to steal. My character. They had already stripped me of home, history, and any illusion of unconditional love. Now they were coming for my name. 2 days later, I ran into Pastor Raymond at the grocery store. He'd known me since I was 12, baptized me in a cold lake when I was 14, and spoke at my father's memorial. Rachel, he said, cautious but kind. I've been hearing things I don't believe. But you might want to come by. There's a lot of noise. I smiled. Pastor, I've lived in noise my whole life. I'm finally enjoying the quiet. His eyes softened, but there was something in them. Worry, maybe, or regret. That same evening, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. Your mom filed for guardianship over you. Claims you're emotionally unstable. Said you're not fit to handle your own finances. David M., county clerk assistant. My stomach dropped. It was laughable, ridiculous. I was 30 years old, independent, employed, homeowner. And yet here they were, trying to drag me through the court system on the flimsiest of lies. But then I remembered something important. I was ready. I had the receipts. Every cent I sent them. Every voicemail full of manipulation. Every moment they proved that they saw me not as a daughter, but as a wallet with a heartbeat. I called my lawyer, Ava, that night. She wants a court fight? I said. Then let's give her one she won't forget. Ava was calm, collected. She didn't blink. She's filing under emergency review, she said. That means we have 10 days to respond. But Rachel, with the evidence you have, I'm not worried. And I wasn't either. Not really. But I was furious. Because even after everything, they still thought I was weak enough to fold. 10 days later, I sat in court. My mother didn't even make eye contact with me. She wore a pale gray suit, pearls at her neck, hair pinned tight like she was trying to squeeze herself back into the role of grieving, saintly mother. Jason sat beside her, chewing gum and scrolling his phone like he'd wandered into the wrong room. The judge glanced at the file Ava handed him, flipped a few pages, then looked at me. Miss Carter, he said, you filed a motion to dismiss this guardianship request? Yes, Your Honor, Ava answered smoothly. We also request sanctions for filing a frivolous claim. We have evidence proving this is retaliatory and baseless. The judge gave a slow nod. Let's see the evidence. Ava handed over a neatly tabbed binder, every section labeled, every document clear. She started with the bank transfers, 10 years' worth of financial support, all from my account to theirs. Then the voicemails. My mother calling me ungrateful, Jason threatening me when I stopped paying. And then, the jewel of it all, a notarized letter from my therapist, verifying my mental fitness, stability, and history of being emotionally manipulated by my family. The judge flipped through it all. 5 minutes passed, then 10. When he finally looked up, his face was unreadable. This request is not only without merit, he said firmly. It's malicious. I'm dismissing it in full. And Miss Carter, should you wish to file a restraining order, the court will support it. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just nodded. Because this time, I didn't win out of luck or desperation. I won because I finally believed I deserved to. Outside the courthouse, I didn't wait for my mother to speak. She tried to call my name, but I walked right past her. Because there's no point in arguing with someone who's decided the truth is a threat. Later that night, I poured a glass of wine, lit a candle, and curled up on the couch with Junebug and my latest book club novel. For the first time in months, I wasn't preparing for another battle. I was planning my next chapter. A few months had passed since the courtroom victory, or as I started calling it in my head, the last attempt, because that's exactly what it had been. A final shot at control. And when it failed, something shifted, not just for me, but in the entire dynamic. The calls stopped, the guilt texts faded. Jason, as far as I knew, had left town after pawning whatever dignity he had left. And my mother, she fell silent. I didn't celebrate, not in the traditional sense. There was no party, no public announcement. Instead, I bought a hammock, a ridiculous little luxury I'd always told myself was too indulgent. But on a bright spring afternoon, I strung it up between two backyard posts, laid back with Junebug on my chest, and just breathed. That was my victory. Peace. True, uninterrupted, uneventful peace. Until one Saturday morning in May. I was sipping coffee on the porch, flipping through a home and garden magazine, when I saw a car I hadn't seen in years. A worn-out sedan with a missing hubcap and a bumper sticker from the church we all used to attend. It pulled into the curb, engine still running. I froze. An elderly woman stepped out slowly, holding something wrapped in brown paper. It wasn't my mother. It was Mrs. Elkins, a family friend from the old days. She used to bring lemon squares to every holiday. She was kind, quiet, the type who hugged too long but always meant well. She approached the porch with a sheepish smile. "I won't stay long," she said softly. "I just wanted to give you this." She handed me the wrapped bundle. I unrolled it carefully and stared down at a photo. It was me, age 14, at the town science fair, holding a trophy almost too big for my hands. My parents weren't in the shot. Only Mrs. Elkins. "You were always going to make it," she said, even when no one wanted to see it. I blinked back unexpected tears. "Why now?" She looked away. "Your mom? She's been telling people she might not have much time left. But even then, she won't admit she was wrong. About you, about everything." I didn't know what to say. "She asked me to come," she added, "but I told her I wouldn't bring guilt disguised as apology. Only truth. And the truth is, I'm proud of you." I nodded slowly. "Thank you," I whispered. She smiled, eyes misty, and walked back to her car without another word. That evening, I went through an old storage bin I hadn't opened in years, full of childhood photos, report cards, scribbled poems, a drawing Jason made me when he was 6 that read, "Rachel is the bestest sister." That version of us felt like fiction now. But I didn't burn it. I didn't toss it out. I just closed the box and slid it back into the closet. Some things don't need to be erased, just shelved. A few weeks later, I stood in front of a small crowd at a women's empowerment event organized by the local library. I'd been asked to speak. Me. Not as a survivor, not as a victim, but as a woman who had learned to choose herself. I told my story, or parts of it. Not the drama, not the court filings, not the passive-aggressive texts, but the truth. The quiet kind of truth. The kind that sinks into your bones when you realize that being loved conditionally isn't love at all. Afterward, a teenager came up to me, her eyes brimming. "My mom always says I'm selfish for setting boundaries," she said. "But hearing you, I don't know. I feel less crazy." I put a hand on her shoulder. "You're not selfish," I told her. "You're awake." And that's what healing is, isn't it? Not some grand, movie-worthy moment, but 1,000 tiny awakenings. The first time you say no and mean it. The first time you don't reply to the guilt. The first time you realize love and obligation don't always belong in the same sentence. Now, every Saturday, I water the little garden by my porch. Thyme, basil, lavender. The lavender reminds me of my childhood, but this time it belongs to me. Not my mother's version. Not Jason's shadow. Just mine. One morning, I got a text from Aunt Linda. Just 5 words. "She asked for you again." I stared at it for a long time, and then I turned my phone off and walked outside. The sun was warm. Junebug was chasing a moth, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear children laughing. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't vengeance, it was freedom. And for the first time, it was enough.